and welcome. I discovered the joy of painting outdoors only a few years ago. I had done drawing and basic art making outdoors in the past, but never pursued it like I do now. Last season I was out every week, sometimes twice a week. We all have busy lives, so I try to balance between daily chores, work life, and pursuing my fine arts practice. This video is a brief, tiny glimpse into an enjoyable pastime that everyone who loves to create art from nature will enjoy. Today we are painting our garden. For the beginner outdoor artist, creating art from your own garden is a nice, easy introduction. Monet painted his own garden over and over, sometimes creating massive works that filled entire walls. This one here is a painting that I saw while I visited the Cleveland Art Museum last year. Of course, most of you are familiar with his water lily paintings. I recently watched an episode of Monty Don as well. He's a British garden master. If you've never seen any of his videos, you definitely have to check it out. During this particular episode, he talked at length about Monet's garden. It's fascinating to watch. I'll put the link in the comments of this video for you so you can check it out. Start by setting up your easel facing your garden. The easel I use is really great for plein air painting. It's nice and light and it's easy to assemble. Set up a comfortable chair. If you decide that you're going to be more adventurous, definitely find a chair that is nice and light to carry. Study your subject and determine an area that you want to focus on. Set up your paints or drawing materials, brushes, rags, paper towel, everything that you think that you're going to need during your painting session. I like to start by beginning to roughly sketch out the large shapes of the area that I want to paint. I use charcoal pencil. You can use anything. When I start my composition, the first thing I like to do is block in the large shapes using fairly neutral colors. If the shape already has a bit of a gray base to it, I'll use the gray, but I won't use anything that's too light or too dark, just something that's kind of in between. This again is a preference. Some artists like to just go right in there and get right down to the business. But I like to block things in, and then as I go, you can adjust the composition when you're doing that, rather than spending a lot of time on detail and then finding out later that your composition needs some work. This particular day I decided I was going to try a little bit different technique, a little bit more loose than what I'm used to. When artists talk about using a loose style, what they mean basically is that they're not concerned a whole lot about the details, but more about the larger shapes and the colors that they see in the scene before them. If you look at impressionistic images and paintings, a lot of that style is a very loose brushwork style. In order to achieve that, I'd like to use the larger brushes. Of course, when you're painting outside, you have to deal with the elements, so make sure you have with you some sunscreen, a nice visor or hat, and you can use sunglasses. The reason why I don't is because it does change the colors that you're seeing, in the environment. If you really need to have sunglasses, then definitely wear those. But I would not wear the polarized style of sunglasses because they do distort colors and things like that. Another thing to keep in mind when painting outside is to be ready for changes in the weather. Always be ready for wind, rain, extreme heat or cold. I did get caught in a thunderstorm one time, and it was my own fault. I knew they were calling for thunderstorms that day, and I still decided I wanted to go painting. I did prepare for it though. I did have a rain jacket with me, and I did hear the thunder coming, and so I packed up quickly and got myself to the car. Starting to work on a little bit more detail right now, adding some extra shadows. I'm going to be working on towards adding some highlights as well. What that does is kind of bring out the shapes, and now suddenly it's not just a blob, but you can actually see the shape of the pots coming out into the artwork. Adding the background, it's a good idea to make the background a lighter color. Should be more blurry, and it should progressively get smaller as you go into the background. This particular composition that I have today, everything that you see in it is pretty much in the same plane. So there isn't a whole lot of background going on except the fence area, which I'll be putting in at the very end. All those pots are fairly close together. So, I mean, I could have made the one in the very back much smaller, but again, that's an artist's decision, and I decided to keep them all pretty much on the same area. As you work on a painting, most artists will describe a time or a point in the artwork where it's sort of the ugly stage, where things don't really look like a whole lot of anything. It just looks like a bunch of blobs, a bunch of brush strokes. That's just basically like anything, as if you were building a house. You have to build the frame and the foundation before you can put all the really cool interior design in there. So that's basically when you're an artist, that you're building things on the canvas or however that you're creating the artwork. And later on is when all the cool stuff starts to happen. As your work progresses, it's a good idea to, like I said at the beginning, you start with a larger brush and you work towards smaller brushes towards the end when you're adding your details. As you see in this time-lapse part, I am adding the fine details to the moss that's in the front foreground. I'm using smaller brushes to put in first the middle ground, then I'm putting in the shadows, and I'm going to add more highlights in. This just kind of brings everything more forward. Obviously, things that you see closer to you have more detail, and things that are further away have less detail and more fuzziness to their edges. This video did not go all the way through towards the end of the composition, simply because I didn't want to make the video too long for you, the viewer. But I did go through the process. So basically, once you get to the process where you're adding in the details, you just continue through. And as I described, as you move towards the back, the details get less defined and much lighter and much fuzzier. hope you enjoyed this first introduction into plein air painting. I'm going to be heading up north in a few weeks, and we'll see if I have time to do some time-lapse videos while I'm there. And when I get back, I'll put together a few more examples of plein air painting for you. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.